Hello?
This is the JWN podcast. My guest today is Carla Oakerson. Carla began her career in comedy while attending law school by working the door at the comic strip in New York City. The owner of the comic strip wouldn't let people working the door get on stage, but she was totally immersed in the world of stand-up comedy, seeing every type of act imaginable. She even met her future husband while working there. Years later, she would sneak off and take comedy classes unbeknownst to anyone with the exception of her daughter. Now, on top of being a defense attorney and a kick-ass mom, her comedy career has become her passion, and she's taking the world of comedy by storm. Please enjoy my conversation with Carla Oakerson. During this pandemic, I felt like very stunted. And, I think a lot of people are just kind of gripped by the anxiety.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I have the means to get this started. I might as well just, the technical part is easy for me. I might as well just get started. And I thought about the things I wanted to talk about. And I'm like, well, I just have a lot in common. I love the idea of creativity in people's lives and try to find that common denominator in people. And, but it's weird because I'm coming at it now like, okay, I'm going to go gung-ho into this thing when most of the people who are doing creative endeavors are now like, just put on the benches,
Yeah.
It's super scary thinking of all of the things that I love to do. First thing, I haven't had any musicians on my podcast yet. And I've been holding out because I feel like it's going to be a very like close and dear to my heart and like a hard conversation to have with people on how they're dealing with that. But I think I'm getting to that point where I'm ready. But your creative outlet, which is stand-up comedy, it just can't exist right now. And it's how's that hitting you?
Well, it exists and it doesn't exist at the same time, right? It's like Schrodinger's comedy, right? Because like there are places. So I'm in New York, and they're like you're allowed to operate with a cabaret license here. So like Governor's Comedy Club is open-ish.
Really?
Yeah, and they have an outdoor space. They built an outdoor space. And inside their indoor space, I don't know if you've ever been there, but they have three clubs, essentially, two in Nassau, one in Suffolk. And their big club holds, I think, about like 250, 300 people. They're maxing it out at 60 people.
Oh.
But still, they're getting, they have socially distanced tables in the outdoor space, and that maxes out at 80 people. And they're getting like 80 people, 50, 60, 70, 80 people regularly because I think people are comfortable being outside in an outside space.
Yeah.
So that kind of led to a big, I guess some kind of like not big, but like some creation of outdoor bar shows. Right. And then that got shut down like last week. Where Governor Cuomo said, if you have a food and liquor license, that doesn't mean you can have a comedy show. That doesn't mean you can do any of this. You can't do it indoor. You can't do it outdoor. Can't do it with a box. Can't do it with a fox. It's not happening. So it kind of just shut down a lot. So, it's interesting because I feel like everyone is kind of moving to like, even though there already were a ton of podcasts, now everyone's moving more towards the podcast because you can do it on the phone. You can do it on Zoom. You can record it. But, I think it's where it's going to is going to be, a huge downsize in comedy because like, if you think about, the bigger acts, people that would, sell out Madison Square Garden, right? Like a huge venue like that. That's not happening for a while. So those guys are going to be moving down into spaces that are going to necessarily eliminate a lot of like smaller headliners.
Right.
Are going to, people who would, have a door deal. Like what kind of a door deal are you going to have if you used to get the money from having 300 people sell out? Now you're getting money from having 60 people or 80 people.
Wow. Yeah. And it's hard to listen to a lot of the comedians that are trying to figure it out right now. You got, was it Bert Kreischer doing like drive-in movie theaters and things like that in Texas or something like that?
Yeah. Well, I just got hired for something like that that's starting in September.
Wow.
That's the same thing, which I don't know how it's going to work exactly, but I was like, sure, let's give it a try because they're going to have comics outside before movies.
Yeah.
So they're reaching out to people like, and they're trying to fit people in like, you know, you've been to one of my comedy shows. Obviously, I can't go before a Disney movie. That's not going to work.
No.
You know, but if they're
Unless it's
doing
one of
like
those old Disney movies that are no longer allowed to be shown, and then you can laugh at it. You can make fun of it.
You know, but I told them, I was like, hey, if you're doing like, you know, I don't know if I think they're doing a combination of old and new movies. I'm like, if you're doing something that's, you know, got a lot of cursing, you know, maybe you throw me in front of Reservoir Dogs, maybe Pulp Fiction. That's going to work out well. That's going to be my people.
Yeah. And it's music is the same way. Like my nephew, or Amy's nephew, really, my wife's nephew.
Love her, by the way.
He's a professional musician, lives out in Nashville. He plays like pop country type music. It does a lot of bars and things like that. But he plays, usually draws, you know, a few hundred people every time he plays. And now he's playing to like, you know, 40 people on a beach.
Yeah.
And he's like, I've got this government unemployment. I've got some stimulus money, but that's running out, and I don't know what's going to happen now. and when you think of the people that this is their living, like you still have your day gig.
Yeah.
Right. So
I downsized a lot of my day gig. I guess I am still. I'm an attorney, and I was a criminal defense attorney, and I kind of burned out on that. It was a lot. So I downsized it a lot. And it was going really well until I got re-downsized, you know, by coronavirus. And now I'm like, I don't know how, you know, it was kind of, the idea was to downsize one while the other one was growing. And now both of them are downsized. And, at the same time, you know, the federal government's like, oh, you guys don't need this money anymore. And I'm like, agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Federal government.
Yeah. It's kind of weird to think about. Well, you're in a unique situation too, because you have two children.
Yeah.
And I guess one of them is from your ex-husband, right?
Yeah.
And he makes his living off of stand-up comedy. So any kind of contribution he's been making is probably just completely taxed at this point now too, because how's he going to make any money?
Yeah. Well, we were, I should say it was ever so slightly blessed that my daughter decided she wanted to study film, and she was, you know, I recruited for the soccer team at Brooklyn College, so that was very affordable. And the most expensive part of that was going to be the housing. The housing at these CUNY schools is very expensive. It's, you know, essentially the same thing as living in Manhattan, living in Brooklyn. You're just going to pay out the nose. And now there's not going to be housing. There's not going to be soccer. It's going to be online. So that worked out kind of well. I have to believe, and I haven't seen it yet, but I have to believe that they're going to do something with financial aid with respect to, you know, parents who, I mean, what parents really haven't experienced a cut in their income from this. So they've got to, you know, extend financial aid, hopefully.
Yeah, if they want these kids to come back once this thing becomes more manageable. I don't think it's ever going away. I think it's like Trump. It's just going to stick around.
Oh, I just don't see, I don't see how, and I really don't. I don't get why we can't get this under control. I really don't. I brought home coronavirus. It was me. I was the outbreak monkey, brought it home to my house.
Mm-hmm.
I spread it like wildfire because apparently I'm gross and I don't wash my hands. I don't know. Gave it to everyone. But after that, you know, we kind of, you know, we were told to quarantine, shelter in place, you know, whatever needed to be done. And we did. Right. And I know a lot of people did. I know New York's in a better situation than a lot of other states who didn't, you know, shut down, I guess.
I'll just look the other way. South Carolina's doing great.
But now, and I said this on Memorial Day weekend, right? On Memorial Day weekend, I had to go to Long Beach for something. And I'm seeing people, you know, just like it's been every other year, block parties, streets are shut down. I'm seeing, you know, chairs at these block parties, socially distanced, right? All the chairs are socially distanced, but they're all empty. And everyone's standing, I should say, talking with the mask, you know, around their chin.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, guys, what are we all doing? What are we all doing? Like we're just being liberated. At least throw the mask on. And look, I get that wearing the mask sucks. And you get the mustache sweat, and I've got the mask knee. You know, it sucks. Is it my favorite thing? No. Is it? Who is this? Who? I don't understand why you feel so strongly about this. Anybody? Like, you don't want to wear a mask? All right. Like, I don't want to wear a seatbelt sometimes, but I put the fucking thing on.
Yeah. Well, the weird thing is okay. I'm in the South, and they take any kind of laws telling you what to do. They take it as like an affront. You know, there's no you could ride a motorcycle down here without a helmet. There's no helmet laws. But at least with a helmet law, you know what? If you want to commit suicide, go ahead, do it. But this is, affecting other people. But what we've seen is the hot spots are the big cities, Charleston, Greenville, Columbia, all of those places. We got this huge uptick about a month or so ago, and they enforced mask laws. Because of that, we're seeing the numbers starting to come down again. Because people are actually, when you go to a store, people are wearing masks. People are taking it a little bit more seriously. Even the people who are like, never masks, I'm not going to do that, they're actually wearing masks now. Because people won't let them in their stores if they're not. So that's kind of, it's proving to them that it's going to work. My fear is that when they see the numbers go down, they go like, we don't need these masks, and they just tear them off and it goes right back up again.
Well, I mean, that's literally what's happening here. That's exactly what's happening here.
And you can see what's going to happen. But we have these countries like Japan or New Zealand. Like, these are people that took it very seriously. And now they don't have a problem. They can go to nightclubs. They can go to see live performances, music, dance. They can go see films, whatever it is. They've got all that stuff back because they all made the sacrifice and they still take it seriously. We're living in a weird time.
But I don't understand. So people and it's not just the South. It is everywhere because there's a lot of that going on here. Like they want to lose their minds about wearing a mask, and the government can't tell me what to do. But since when can the government not tell you what to do? You can't drive drunk. Whose idea was that?
Yeah.
Right. You can't. You have to wear a seatbelt. I'm sure that wasn't a grassroots decision. You got to pay taxes. I'm sure that wasn't our decision either. We didn't choose that.
Right.
Like, they tell us what to do. That's literally all they do is tell us what to do. That's literally their only function is to tell us what to do and what not to do.
But even the example to be set, the leadership, all they needed to do was set the example. They didn't even have to say, hey, you have to wear a mask. They should have just said you should wear a mask, and they should have been seen wearing masks. The amount of people who support the current president, which is still mind-numbingly that anyone at this point is still supporting him, but they're out there. There's a lot of them. The amount of them that decided they were okay with wearing masks after he decided to be seen in public with wearing a mask was like 58% decided, oh, they're okay with wearing masks now, which goes to show you all it takes is like just an ounce of leadership. Just set a good example. And we're asking for a lot.
I feel like set a good example.
Exactly. I'm asking for a lot.
Okay.
But even here, our governor is just laughably an ignorant person, and it's scary. It's scary whenever he would speak and have a press conference during this whole thing. It was like you were watching the end of the world. Like if you had a cartoon character of the worst person to have as your governor, his name is Governor McMaster. It's just, whereas Cuomo, as much as you guys probably are annoyed at him, he's at least he's trying everything he can in his power to get this thing under control. And you guys went from the worst to one of the best places.
Like, I actually don't have a problem with anything that Cuomo does. And here's why. I'm not, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, really. I'm just like, I'm a bit all over the place. I'm definitely way left of Democrat. But here's my take on Cuomo is, what are the other options, right? At this point, most of our leadership is and should be throwing anything at the wall and see what sticks, right? Masks, gloves, stay inside, don't go out, close the schools. I don't know, close this, close that. Don't do this. Shut down the subway. Clean the subway, clean the Long Island Railroad. Don't let people in, don't let people out. We've never dealt with anything like this before, so I feel like we got to give them a huge leeway to figure out how to do something.
Yeah.
We can't complain that they don't have a plan of action for something we've never seen before.
Right. Or if they make a mistake, you can't call them frauds.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you knew what you were doing.
Yeah, he allowed the, terminal COVID patients to be put into nursing homes. Okay, now we're seeing, now we're also seeing I've read some articles, some evidence that putting people on a respirator was maybe not the best idea.
Yeah.
Right, maybe that's the best idea. Okay, so is everyone going to now, across the board, shit all over doctors?
Right.
Like, we haven't seen this before. We're trying, we're trying this, we're trying that, we're trying to keep people alive. They're having trouble breathing. We think respirator. If that wasn't the way to go, now we're not going to maybe do something different. We're trying the, malaria drugs. We're trying antibiotics. We're trying steroids. We're trying.
Right.
We haven't seen this before, so there's no treatment. It's not the common cold. It's not the flu. It's not, it's not something we've seen before. So work with us. And that's why, when people are like, oh, Cuomo this and Cuomo that, I'm like, what do you want him to do? What book do you want him to refer to that we have? We don't have anything. There's no go-to manual. There's nothing. There's just figure it out. So he's trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And it upsets me that people don't use any common sense with certain things about trying to figure it out. At the beginning of this, when they were saying don't wear masks or anything like that, they weren't saying that to say masks aren't effective. They were trying to protect the supply. Does anyone remember how hard it was to get toilet paper when this all started?
Yeah.
Now, imagine you're a doctor and you can't, or a nurse, and you can't get a face mask because Billy Bob down the street decided he was going to buy up every face mask on Amazon.com because he, is more valuable than the people who are actually fighting this thing in the front lines. So like to act like, oh, the CDC and the World Health Organization said don't use masks. It's like, yeah, because they needed them for the people who needed them the most until we can get it under control. Like, let's use a little common sense here. But
also, who wants to go with a maybe? Like, they're saying maybe the masks aren't as good as we thought. Well, but maybe they are. So why not just put on the mask? They're not saying, nobody's saying, well, if you remove your kidney by yourself, if you self-remove your kidney, you'll probably not get, coronavirus, but maybe you will. It's not that hard. You're not doing anything except throwing a piece of fabric on your face.
Yeah.
I mean, people wear condoms to not get chlamydia, which is treatable.
Well, let's not compare that, because there are a lot of people who should be wearing condoms that just keep spitting out kids.
Yeah, but there's no anti-condom movement. Nobody's like, fuck these condoms. Oh, am I allowed to curse? I don't know.
Yes, of course.
Oh.
Can you imagine?
Like, down with condoms. How dare they? How dare they tell me that I don't want to have chlamydia and I don't want to have herpes? I want it. It's mine. It's my God-given right.
It's my choice. There are people out here who stand in front of Planned Parenthood who probably think condoms are also evil. So the price we pay for the freedom that we have, we pay the price of having to give everybody that freedom. And sometimes you just scratch your head. We're living in such strange times that normally all of this news that's going on, like the New York Times is basically saying, hey, there's aliens. And we have proof. Like there's physical out of this world aircraft that the government has, and there's proof of it. And everyone's like, and it's like on the 18th page. Like nobody even cares. I'm like,
look, I think that nobody cares about the aliens. I think no one cares because they all realize that our planet has become such a shithole that they're not coming here. They came here.
They probably were here and left.
They were here and they were like, oh no.
And we shot them down.
Yeah. And they were like, yeah, don't go back there. It's a bad neighborhood. If you're going to go through there, you should probably lock your doors, close the windows. So you don't want to be there. Trust me. It's not.
You don't want to go there. those motherfuckers don't even wear masks when they go outside. Fuck that
Yeah.
planet.
They're just spreading germs all over the place. They don't want to wear condoms. They don't want to wear masks. You don't want it. Just go somewhere else.
They could read our minds, and they were like, "Fuck no."
They're like, Pluto is nice this time of year. Go there. There's nice. That's nice.
Man, let's go. Let's talk about how you got into this whole comedy thing. So, I'm gonna talk for a minute here, just because I want to establish for people who don't know how I know you.
Oh yeah.
We went to high school together, and
yes, we did.
I don't know. I'm not 100% sure about how you got into Holy Child. I know I got in there on a scholarship and grant money. There's no way my family could afford to send me to that school, because there was like 22 kids in our graduating class. And it was definitely a strange experience for me. And I'm a white guy. I'm a white male.
Right, yeah, so I was also one of the poor kids.
Okay.
Right.
So so it was like you, me, Kamala, and like Natalie Elvert, I think.
Yeah. Right. So the school was, I think, small enough that like you could, identify the diversity, right? If they said it was 2% African American, that was Kamala and Natalie. And then when they said it was 2% Hispanic, that was me and Rochelle, and that's it. Right.
Oh man, I think I went on a date with Rochelle Fernandez once.
Did you?
Yeah. She was beautiful.
Hot. She's hot.
I mean, I shouldn't say was. She is beautiful.
She is beautiful.
Yeah, I think I might have been like batting out of my league there. So we both went to school at this very private school. And I honestly never felt like, I didn't feel that I was a poor kid until maybe senior year, when I was still on the meal plan.
Yeah, I felt like I was a poor kid because like everybody's pulling up in like, a BMW, a brand new Jeep, my dad's Mercedes, my dad's old Mercedes. He doesn't want it anymore. It's 2 years old. Gross. That was when I kind of felt like I was the poor kid. I was like, oh, I really am a poor kid. Like, I didn't think I was, which is interesting. Also, like looking back on it, when you think about like, okay, like where we grew up compared to where, the situation that other people might have had, like, we weren't the poor kids.
Yeah,
if we were in this school.
If we were in public school, we would have been completely middle class, or we would have been towards the top of the class, possibly.
Yeah.
Or, but in that school, we were kind of like the token people.
Yeah, like because I didn't have my own horse.
Yeah.
And
and I'll tell you what, the worst thing that I ever, and I still, they had this thing called sports night every year.
Yeah.
And they'd separate the school into two teams, white and blue. And in my senior year, I was in charge of the mural, and I was on the white team. And Nina Malik was the captain, I believe. And I dropped out when I realized I quit. I like just walked off the sports team, and I just completely gave up. And I still regret. This is one of those things I feel awful to this day, because I was so embarrassed, because there was no room in my house to actually put the mural. It was like there was not enough square footage at any point. My house was 1,100 square feet over 4 floors. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't a big house. And I was like, I can't put this mural. I can't even paint like in squares. I wouldn't even know what to do with it. I'm supposed to invite people over to help me out with this. I was mortified, and I was just like, I'm just going to act like a stoner and quit. And I've always kind of wanted to reach out to Nina and explain it to her, because I remember she was just like, well, just do it at my house. And I'm like, I don't even have a ride to get there. Like, what are you going to come pick me up? Like, that was when I felt I was a poor kid. I was like, oh.
I had a lot of that too, because I didn't have a car, and I was in Uniondale, right?
Yeah.
So I was in not a good school district. So I left Kellenberg, and my mom really wanted me to go to Holy Child. And I think it was like a combination of loans. And then, to be honest, she still owed money when I graduated. She didn't pay it until like 2 years later. She wasn't done paying it off. So for my mom, it was really like a big deal that she wanted me to go to a better school. Kellenberg had changed up some of their options. I used to be smart for like a minute. And like there weren't, AP classes were being canceled, and like, there wasn't Latin, and there was all this stuff that it shouldn't have mattered. My mom was like, this is important. I'm a first generation American, so for my mom, it was important that, I go to a good school, I go to a good college. Like this was,
Yeah.
this was it. So she wanted me to go there. It was too late for me to get financial aid. We definitely couldn't afford it. I think my mom may have taken out a private loan for some of it. And then, like I said, owed money, by the time I graduated. And I really I didn't feel like it was a big deal. Yeah. Until like, somewhere in senior year where everybody was, going to, Kitchen Cabaret for lunch and spending $25 on lunch.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
And
Yep.
I was like, wait, like you just do that? You just spend my mom was not giving me $25 for lunch. Are you people crazy?
Yeah. And there was a weird situation there though, because I think the teachers were so, and I know this now in my adulthood, how good the teachers were, because we're still friends with them.
Mm-hmm.
Like they still communicate with us on Facebook and email, and I get text messages from our old principal.
Mm-hmm.
It's, and I'm in my 40s now, and I'm still like getting this kind of influence from my high school teachers. So we did get a lot from that we didn't know at the time, beyond like the experience of being in this kind of rich elite school.
Mm-hmm.
There were some benefits to it, and I think it probably showed up for you at least later on in life when you are becoming a self-starter type of person. You're an entrepreneurial type of person. And I think a lot of that might have been instilled partially, or at least, some gas was thrown on the fire while you were at that school. So
I don't have any complaints about the school in and of itself. I don't even really have very many complaints about the people. I mean, I will say, like, I experienced, I think, I would say my first, like, do you call it racism if it's because I'm Hispanic? Because I'm fairly white. I'm pretty white. I'm white. So if it's racism, it's something, I remember exactly what it was. I talk about it a lot, actually. And it was that girl, that unfortunate looking girl, Lauren.
Spordone.
Yeah.
That's the only way you can say her last name, by the way.
Yeah. And we were in that social justice class. Yeah. Does that ring a bell?
Was that,
it was like whatever religion was.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't religion anymore. It wasn't called religion anymore. It was called something else.
All right. Yeah.
And
theology.
They were talking about, it was theology. I thought it was called social justice, but I might be wrong. Maybe we were doing a social justice chapter. I don't know. And out of nowhere, like, she starts talking about, like, well, I forget what her example was, but she goes, well, it's not like we're in a third world country like Colombia. And she just looked right at me. And I was like, what? Are you serious?
She was one of the people in that school, her and Frank Smukler, who looked like they stepped off of the DVD cover, or a VHS cover, I guess at the time, of like any 80s movie of playing like the bad preppy person.
Yeah, like a popped up collar and like
sweater tied around their neck.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were, and they acted the part, and it was almost comical. Like, I always was amused by how, like, unreal it was. Like, this is a real person. Like, this isn't just a caricature of like that privileged type of person. They really existed, and they were they were so two-dimensional. Not all of them, though.
I think at one point she either said or started a rumor that my parents were in in a drug cartel. Yeah, and I was like, in my head, I was like, well, if my parents were in a drug cartel, maybe you shouldn't be so loose with your mouth.
Wow. Yeah, she
Isn't
was.
that like, hasn't that been well established by many, many movies? Like, did you not see Scarface? Maybe you don't fuck with the kid whose parents are in the drug cartel, dummy.
Maybe you keep your mouth shut. Yeah.
Hmm?
Yeah. Maybe you keep your mouth shut. Maybe you don't, you don't drop bombs like that thinking you're safe.
Yeah. And then she also asked me one time if I eat tacos at home. And I'm like, yeah, I eat tacos at home. Like, doesn't everyone eat tacos?
What is
Like,
Tuesday just a day for you?
Yeah. I'm like, there's literally an entire chain devoted to tacos. Have you never heard of Taco Bell?
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not the only one who eats tacos at home.
Yeah. That was.
I don't know what that has to do with my ethnicity. I thought everyone loves tacos. Who doesn't fucking love tacos?
There was a couple of those people. There was a couple in that clique of people who surprised me when they had family trouble. I'm not going to name names on any of this kind of stuff, but when they had family troubles and they like reached out to me because they knew I came from like a broken family, just to kind of get some advice on how to cope with it. And I was like, oh, they're okay. They have the same problems that you and I. It doesn't matter that they were born into some sort of like privileged life. They still are struggling. And it made me see some of them in a different light. So it was a weird learning experience. It was honestly like going to school in a John Hughes movie at some points.
It really was.
Yeah, it was fun because of the leniency that you did get from being there.
Yeah.
Being able to like go for a smoke break in the principal's office. I don't know if you ever got to do that.
No, I wasn't smoking yet.
Oh, see, yeah, we used to get invited to go smoke in her office, which is so like if that happened now, she would be like so arrested. She was the best.
Yeah. It really was like pretty in black tartan plaid.
Yeah, it was an odd place, and it's what are you gonna do? But so here's where I wanted to steer it into your comedy career. That's how we met each other through high school. And of course, like years later, people get connected through Facebook and things like that.
Yeah.
And I was a huge fan of like talk radio when I was working and stuff. I would listen to Ron and Fez was probably my favorite of all the talk radio shows.
Yeah.
Ron Bennington is just he's an amazing radio personality.
Yeah.
And his kind of adopted son at a certain point, probably in what mid 2000, like I guess 2010s, early 20 teens, maybe.
Yeah. Like I would say no, like early 2000s, like 2002 on.
Well, he became
2000.
he like adopted your husband.
Yes.
Basically. So
yeah.
And I did not put it together. Like I didn't even think about it. Even when he would come on the radio and they would talk about like relationships and he'd say, yeah, my wife, Carla. And I'm just not even thinking like, oh, Carla's last name is Oakerson. This is Big J Oakerson talking about his wife, Carla. Maybe they're the same person. I'm just so brain dead and like you know what I'm saying? I'm so the type of person that shit like that goes right over my head until I like realized it. I think it was maybe when you were doing a roast of him. And I was like, holy shit, that's Carla Camiso. Somehow, did you meet him because you were a fan of comedy and you saw him at a comedy? How did you get into comedy?
Okay, so I was always a fan of comedy. I would, my mom was a single working parent, so I would come home from school. I would watch a lot of TV. I used to watch the MTV half-hour comedy hour. This is before Comedy Central existed. I was super into stand-up comedy. I used to, watch it incessantly. Obsessively. I used to love Richard Jenny. That was like my thing. I loved it. I know this is probably like unpopular to say now, but like Bill Cosby, I loved for as long as I can remember.
Oh, I had the vinyl records when I was a kid, like before I even lived with my grandmother.
Yeah, exactly. Like young. I was, Bill Cosby, Parenthood. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I used to watch the VHS tapes all the time. There was a point in time where I probably had it memorized. And then, Saturday Night Live, I loved Saturday Night Live. I was allowed to stay up and watch it. It was, something that I just was kind of part of me. And I ended up, while I went to NYU, I got a job at the comic strip, right? Which I don't know why I never tried the Comedy Cellar, but I ended up getting a job waitressing at the comic strip, right? And I worked there for a long time. It was a different sort of job.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of hard to get away from. I don't know if you've ever worked, as like in like the serve, like as a waitress, or as a waiter.
Oh, my first
But
job.
if you have a good job, like waiting tables, you can make a lot of money, and it's all cash, right? So it's kind of hard to get away from, and it's pretty easy, like at the time, at the heyday of the comic strip, they had 3 sold out shows Friday night, 3 sold out shows Saturday night. And if I left a weekend at the comic strip and made less than $600, I would be pissed.
Yeah. Wow.
And
you're
it was all
college age.
And I'm college age. Now, I wasn't, drinking. I wasn't going out. I wasn't doing all this stuff. I did that like early on. Then I got this job, and then like I didn't have weekends anymore because why would I want to turn down this money? I was just making money. So I was working there still, loved comedy. At one point I debated, I wanted to start doing comedy. This is, pretty early on. The manager at the time of the manager and booker of the comic strip had a rule that you couldn't do comedy and work there. You could either work there or you could do comedy, but you couldn't do both.
Which kind of is the opposite of a lot of comedy clubs, right?
Yeah, it is the opposite of a lot of comedy clubs. These are his rules, right? And at the time I was making a lot of money. So I, was like, I'll back burner it, right? Fine. So I met Jay there. I met Jay when he, was still living in Philly. He was just starting to come up to New York. He was, brand spanking new in comedy, probably like a year in, maybe max. Wow. 2 years in, which for comedy is like, you're a comedy fetus. And, I met him, and, we started dating, and he would drive up from Philly every day. And at one point, he started talking about moving to New York, and we were already in a relationship. So we were like, let's move in together. That'll be great. Then, we'll be together, and we'll, not have to pay so much rent, and it'll be fantastic. Right. So we get our first apartment together, living with Kurt Metzger was our roommate.
All right.
So now we have our apartment, and, now, we're living together, and this goes right back to the condom story. I got pregnant. And, shortly thereafter, I gave birth to my beautiful daughter, Isabella, and I continued to work at the comic strip, and I was in law school. I went to law school. And again, there's, it's one of those things that you keep back burnering it. And it was like, now that was kind of Jay's thing, and I had to work, and we had a child. So I was kind of supporting the household for a really long time. Right. So I was like comedy peripheral for forever, for 20 years, probably, before I started doing comedy. I was comedy peripheral. Then, Jay decided, well, I guess, he'd long since decided that he was going to cheat on me. That was kind of his hobby. It was, really, he excelled at it. And
traveling comedian.
Yeah. Who knew, right? Who would have thunk it? But at some point, it just kind of went as far as it was going to go. And, he left me for somebody that he was cheating on me with. And that wasn't the best part of my life. But now I'm more distant from comedy, and I really missed it. I really did. And then I, still following everyone's career. I would say on and off, if you want to talk about it, writing, like just writing down things that I thought were funny, And in the back of my mind for a long time, I really thought that our family would make a great sitcom, right? And this was even before I started doing comedy. I still thought it would make a great sitcom. You have a lawyer wife, a comedian husband, and, Isabella just has always had a really, really great sense of humor. She's always been really quick and really sharp, and more than a little bit mean,
Which side of the family does that come from?
Both.
Nice.
And, she was raised around Patrice O'Neal, so she just got it from everywhere. It was nature, nurture. She gets it from everywhere, right? So, even very early on, she would just say things that were hilarious. Like her take on situations were really funny. Like the situations that we would end up with would be funny. And I thought it would make, for a good sitcom. So it was just kind of in the back of my head. I'm always like writing notes that, at some point, we'll write this up, or somebody will write this up, and I'll throw them my notes, and, maybe I'll get a writing credit or a producer credit. Right. So fast forward, now we're separated. Jay and I go to war for about a year. We're at war, and then we just kind of both decided we were tired of it. I just don't have the personality to be at war forever. I know some people want to, be at war with their ex-spouse for, the rest of their lives. I don't have it in me. I'm just too lazy.
Yeah, and you
I'm
got a
too
kid
lazy
in
to stay
between.
angry that long.
Yeah, and there's a kid in between who's gonna love each of you in different ways. So it's like, well, there's only one loser in that battle if you continue it.
Mm-hmm. So we just kind of, now we're at peace, and I get asked to do Jay's roast, right? So I get asked to do Jay's roast. I roast Jay on the Kumia Network.
Was that before you started doing comedy? That was like your first taste of like...
That was literally, like, if you want to talk about my first time on stage, that was my first time on stage.
So that's hysterical.
Yeah.
All right. That is really funny because you knew everybody in the room just from
I knew
working
everyone there
as a waitress.
Yeah, and everyone knew me, and nobody really thought it was somewhat of a surprise to most people there, that I was even going to do it, and it went well. And after it came out, I got kind of a huge, a pretty big influx of social media followers, right? And I'm not the best gatekeeper. I have like all the weird Indian guys are on, all my pages. I don't really care. all these weirdos. I just let everybody in and then, sort them out later. But some people started messaging me and they were like, "Oh, we thought you were really funny. We didn't realize you were a comedian. Where can we see more of your stuff? Do you have a YouTube channel? Do you have this? Do you have that?" And I was like, no. No.
You could see me at this court when I am defending this guy who friggin' did some dumb shit.
Yeah, and then I started talking like often on Messenger or whatever to a guy who was like a huge podcast comedy lover, right? So Rogan, Your Mom's House, Skanks, everything. He loved all the podcasts. And he messages me one day because this is actually kind of hilarious. He moved to Italy for a year for some reason, and he likes some chick there. So he messages me for love advice. And he says, and I quote, "I just want you to help me do this. Like, how did you and Jay make your love blossom when you didn't speak any English and he didn't speak any Spanish?" And I was like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" I'm like, "What?"
He probably spoke better English than Jay does.
I did. I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, when did I not speak English?" So, I just kind of I was like, "Listen, I'll give you whatever chick advice you want, but I don't know how to make you communicate with someone you can't communicate with. I speak English. I was born here. Racist." Freak. Goddamn middle America. And so he just, in conversation, he was like, again, same thing. Like, "I really enjoyed you on the roast, blah, 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 comedy." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't do comedy." And he was like, "Oh, why not? It's not something you're interested in." And I'm like, "No, I'm super interested in it. I've always wanted to do it. I sometimes write things down that are funny, and it's really, just kind of been something I've always loved and I've always wanted to do it." And he was like, "So why don't you?" Right. And it was like, I never even asked myself, like, at this point, like, why don't you? Like, I could have done both at any point in time. Right.
Yeah.
Once I left the comic strip, I could have, started doing comedy. I could have at any point in time. And he was like, "Well, I don't understand why, if you never did, why don't you now?" And I was like, "Oh, well, isn't that an interesting question to ask and for me to ask myself?" And I really did kind of like take over my mind for probably a good week, where, it's like I feel like every time I wasn't thinking about anything actively, it kind of would just like pop into my head, like, "Well, why don't you?" Like, and finally it was like, literally, what's the absolute worst that could happen? Right? Like, I suck at it and, I don't do it. I'm already not doing it. Right? So I literally come back to not doing it and everything's exactly the same. So at first I was on Long Island. Jay was in the city. I kind of did it. This is actually one of my favorite comedy, excerpts. I'm on Long Island. I don't know anything about Long Island comedy. There's like a whole weird comedy subculture, if you want to call it, on Long Island. It's kind of, Long Island comedy likes to pretend like New York City isn't 25 minutes away, right? But there's a whole subculture of shows and clubs and open mics and all this stuff. And I don't know how to get into it, right? So I did what I actually don't usually recommend people do, which is I decided to enroll in a comedy class, right? And I figured I would meet people, make connections, and then decide where I'm going to go from there, right? The reason why I don't have anything against people who teach comedy classes, but in my experience and, watching other people also in my class, they do a lot of writing for you. And I already had things that I wanted to say. So for me, it was great because I was ultimately, I could be forceful enough to say no, I don't want you to write for me some goofy mom joke. I have my own stuff that I want to talk about. I have my own stuff. I've written some of this stuff down. I have my own life experience that I think is funny. And so it was helpful to me. But I think a lot of people that went there ended up with, some cookie cutter, you come in and you're the angry housewife and you're, the disgruntled teenager and you're, the angry black comic. And, it's not everybody, necessarily fits into that cookie cutter mold when you see them and what they want to talk about.
It's funny. So, I'm going to interject for 1 second. I have a client because he messaged me this morning. That's the only reason it popped in my head. He's a lawyer, and I remember him telling me he went to a comedy class. He took comedy lessons to learn how to have better timing and more confidence when he was in trial.
Yeah,
so he went to comedy class to learn how to be a better lawyer.
Which I think some comics actually really hate that about comedy classes. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I tell people to take improv classes to think on their feet faster. If you feel sometimes you can't think of what to say until, 2 hours after your conversation, job interview, argument, whatever it is, an improv class kind of trains your brain a different way. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but some people don't like that. And I think that's why a lot of people frown on comedy classes, because they're like, oh, it's full of people that don't even want to be comics. Well, who cares? Comedy's full of people that don't even want to be comics.
You could say that about every subject, by the way, in college.
Exactly. Yeah, and aside from that, so is comedy. There's so many comics that people are in and then they're out and then they come back and then they quit and then they open a club, they never want to do comedy again, and then people are in it for 30 years or 40 years or 50 years and they retire and they never made any money, or they made a ton of money and now they're movie stars. It's the same with every profession.
But I think you described it perfectly. I don't know if you meant to describe it, but there was a string pulling at your heart saying you need to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I go in the class and Jay's if you're a comic, Jay might not be a household name in the way that Eddie Murphy is and Kevin Hart and Bill Cosby, Roseanne Barr. But if you are a fan of comedy, you know who Jay is, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't want to do that. So I go in and I'm undercover as Carla Camiso, right? My alias. Going in as Carla Camiso. I'm doing my thing and it's going to be great. And so I forget what the comedy class costs. Let's just say it costs $300, right? I come in the first day. I hadn't made the payment, and I had whatever on me, $150 in cash, $200, whatever it was, right? So I give them the money and I'm like, I'll bring you the rest in cash. And they were like, great. You want to pay with a card? And I'm like, no, I'll bring you cash. Everybody loves cash. Fine. So then we get to almost the end of the class and there's a show, right? That's, your graduation show. And I'm not promoting shit at this point. Nothing. I haven't told anybody. The only person who knew was Isabella. She was way in. She was super excited. I've been taking improv classes for about 6 or 7 years at this point, and I didn't tell anybody about that either.
Wow.
Because improv, improv is the retarded cousin of comedy, right? Comics hate improv. So it was just going to get, Jay was going to mock me. Everybody was going to make fun of me, and I didn't tell anyone. Right. So here we are, and it's there's 3 classes left. So 3 weeks left in the class, and I still haven't brought in money, and I keep forgetting to bring in cash. And finally I'm like, oh, you know what? Let me just give you a card, because I'll keep forgetting. And I don't want you guys to think I'm not trying to pay you. So I just give him the card. I'm not thinking. Right. I give them my card, and the guy, Rich Walker, who I love, very funny comic who teaches the class, grabs my card, turns around, takes 4 steps, and then turns back around.
Sees the card name.
Yeah, and he goes, "This card says Carla Oakerson." And I'm like, yeah, I know, like, it's whatever. Just like, it's my card. Like, I can show you ID if you want. Like, it's my card. He goes, no. He goes, "Are you married to Jay Oakerson?" And I was like, yeah, but it's like complicated. And, I just, and he's like, "Does he not know that you're doing this?" I'm like, "Well, actually, nobody knows that I'm doing this." Right. So then, like, it becomes a whole thing after the class where, him and Peter Bales and the other, they're all discussing whether it makes sense for me to go with Carla Oakerson or Carla Camiso. Now it turns into a thing. And they were like, "We think you should just go with Carla Oakerson. Fuck it. Just do it. Like, what's the worst that can happen?" So I'm still pretty much undercover at this point because, like I said, I'm not really promoting anything. Like, nobody really knows anything. And I don't remember what the situation was that we were supposed to do as a family on the day of this show. We were supposed to do something that was like being planned. And so we're sitting, with Jay, and we're talking, and he's like, "Oh, well, next Thursday, we have to blah, blah, blah. So, we'll meet at X time and we'll go do it." And Isabella and I just kind of like catch eyes, and she's like, "Oh, well, she's little, right? At the time, she's like 13. And she's like, "Oh, well, that day's not great because I have to," and she's like, I could see her, like, the wheels are turning, and she's trying to come up with an excuse. And I'm like, I'm not going to make her lie. It's just not necessary. And I was like, I actually have something to do. I'm like, I have something to do that day. And he's like, "Well, can you move it? Because, this is like the most convenient day for me." And I'm like, I really can't. And he's like, "Well, what do you have to do?" And I'm like, whatever. It's some things that I have to do on the day. And he's like, "I don't understand." And he's looking at me and Isabella being like super sketchy. And he's like, what am I missing here? Like, very clearly there's something going on. And then I was like, "All right, fine." Like, I took a comedy class, and it's my comedy show. It's my graduation show. And I didn't want anyone to know about it. And, whatever. I'm like, "You can laugh at me if you want. I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway. I don't give a shit." I'm like, you don't own comedy. You're not the king of comedy. You're not the president of comedy. I do comedy if I want. And he was like, "All right, first of all, settle down." Second of all, he's like, "I don't know why you wouldn't, like, tell me, and, like, why are you hiding this? Like, there's no reason to hide it." And he said essentially the same thing I was thinking. He's like, "What's the worst that happens?" He's like, "You bomb, everyone bombs. Either you keep doing it or you don't, or, it goes well and you keep doing it and it's great. So what's the problem?" And he was like, "I'm kind of bummed that you didn't even ask me to come." And I was like, "Seriously? Like, really? Like, you would come to my, like, goofy graduation show?" And he was like, "Yeah, of course I would come to your goofy graduation show." And, yeah, aw. And then he came to my goofy graduation show, and he said that thing that I could have hoped for, which was like, he's like, "You actually made me laugh." He's like, you actually made me laugh out loud. And I was like, "Shut the fuck up. Really? All right." Because I thought he was going to be faking it. And Isabella was sitting with him. She was like, "No, you really laughed." And, the rest is, I guess, Carla Oakerson comedy history. I just, kind of am still, working at it, muscling it out, trying to build something, trying to get funnier, trying to keep people laughing, trying to keep people entertained.
Well, it's such a difficult. It's not something that can easily be learned, but you were always a naturally confident, funny person. In other words,
I also feel like I had an internship, like I had a 20-year comedy internship.
Yeah, but even from high school, you were never a meek person. You were never.
Yeah.
You always had a strong personality. You were not going to back down from anything, and that was just a quality you possessed, whether it came from your upbringing or just something that's in your blood. But
yeah, Lauren, I don't care what you say about my cartel parents.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. You brought up the B word. What was it like the first time you bombed? Or did you ever bomb? That should be my actual question. But I imagine, it's like saying
I have bombed, and it's, to me, it's funny, right? Like, I don't give comedy advice, right? very, like, I don't give like, pages and pages of comedy advice. I give very, very short, if anyone ever asks me. And one of the things that that I tell people, it was told to me by Joe Starr, who's been doing this forever, very, very funny comic. Again, not a household name, but if you're like in comedy, you know him. And I bombed in front of him, and he killed. He killed, and for some reason I had to follow him. It was not good.
Oh.
And I bombed, and he was there, and he kind of like somewhat witnessed it. He wasn't super paying attention, but I think he certainly caught that a lot of my jokes weren't hitting. I maybe sometimes, because I talk a lot, I fall into like doing a little too much crowd work. And if it doesn't hit, you need to be able to dig yourself out of that hole really fast. And I didn't. So I just didn't catch them. And I kind of like, walked off, and I was like, oh, well, that kind of went bad. And he was like, why? And I was like, I don't know. They just didn't like me. He goes, how do you know they didn't like you? You didn't, he's like, they don't know when they're supposed to laugh. If something doesn't hit, just keep going. They have no idea when it's supposed to get funny. They have no idea. The only way that they know that you bombed is if you let them know it's going bad. And you let them know it was going bad. He's like, you could have just skipped over that first, joke that didn't hit and gone into, he's like, you could have just gone into something hits every time. He's like, instead you chose to try to dig yourself out of that hole. Why? They didn't know. He's like, they're stupid. They don't know. They don't know what you're about to say. They have no idea where you're going with it. And that was pretty much, how I handle bombing going forward. If it doesn't hit, I move to something completely different. Like, you guys don't want to hear, like, was that a little too raunchy? You don't want to hear about that? Okay, I'll talk about my kids for a while. You guys will like that. You want it to be a little more subdued, a little less, you want a little less dick in your face? I can do that. I have fun, I have fun, slightly less edgy kid stories you're going to like,
Man, it's one of those things I think that probably holds most people who would even think about getting into stand-up comedy or even improv, is that thought of bombing, that feeling like, oh my gosh, everyone's looking at me and they are judging me. And it's, again, you've got this personality that you can move past that and not hold on to that, which it's like a superpower that you have to have in order to be a successful stand-up comedian. Because I've seen plenty of comedy shows where, especially if I used to go to the Comedy Cellar all the time when I lived in New York, and you would see legends just eat their dicks on stage because they're trying out new material. And it would be funny because you would see somebody that is like an A-list comedian just completely get the whole place groaning. And it was always funny because they didn't wear it like, oh, I bombed. They would just keep moving. They'd push through it. Colin Quinn is probably one of the best bombers you'll ever watch live, because he will try to go places that if you're not on your A game as an audience member, if you've had a few drinks, you might get lost in what he's talking about. And that probably happens to him more than any other comedian that in New York. It's pretty impressive to understand that, like, I just watched this guy completely, for lack of a better term, make an ass of himself, and he'll be up there an hour later doing it again, trying to tweak it and work it. It's an interesting craft.
And that's really the bit. Like, I think that's the biggest part of, doing stand-up comedy, is just getting back out there. Like, if you bomb one time, that's it. That was one time. Like, you can't hang your hat on the last time that you did well, and you can't give up the one time or the few times that you didn't do well. Every crowd is not your crowd, and every day you're not on fire. Some people are. There's some people that I'm surprised to hear they ever bombed, and then sometimes the crowd's just not there with you. Can I tell you my new favorite bomb story? Sure. Was very recent. It was actually my first time doing comedy after we got somewhat lifted off of quarantine. There's a comedian, O'Henny Cornelius, very funny, who had a festival. He was starting a festival called Smokes and Jokes. It was a marijuana heavy festival, and it got canceled because of the pandemic. And then once everything kind of reopened, kind of pulled it back together on a few different rooftops in Brooklyn, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I go out there, and I was told that the show started at 5. So me and another comic, we race out there. We were on Long Island. I had something to do. I was like, I can't leave until 4. We haul buns. We get to Brooklyn at like 5:15. I'm like, all right, it's going to be fine. The show started at 9. So we were very early, but so was everyone. I don't know where the miscommunication happened. There were a lot of people there. There were a lot of audience people there that were there at 5. And it was the Smokes and Jokes Festival, and they were ready with their smoke. They were ready with it. So these people are smoking. Like, I don't smoke. I don't. It just makes me sleepy. But everybody else, they were pulling bongs out of like their backpacks and talking about, joints versus blunts versus, like I learned a lot. I learned a lot about marijuana that day.
The secret art of carving up fruit to make a pipe out of it.
Yeah. It was like I was there with my own crew of marijuana sommeliers. They were helping me out. But everyone's smoking from basically 5 o'clock till 9:30 because the show even started late for the time that it was supposed to start, right? So we're in Brooklyn. It's before 4th of July. We're about a block away from the trains, right? Everyone's smoked out. And I guess, I don't know if I was rusty from, not doing it for a few months, or I just had a contact high, but there's fireworks going off in the background. There's a train. And I'm about 3 minutes into my set, and I literally just forgot everything. No idea where I was going. No idea what I just said. I was just like, and then at that moment, like fireworks go off in the background, and I'm like, oh, and then that happened, and then this is happening. All right. And they're just laughing
because they're on that level.
Yeah. So it was a total bomb, but at the end, it kind of almost didn't feel like a bomb because they were like, you were so funny, and you just kept going, wow, all right. And they were like, that was hilarious. And I was like, was it though? Yeah. Was it?
It's, by the way, that is the type of thing why comedy needs to be in front of a live audience. Like, you can watch a comedy special from the best comedians, and halfway through you're kind of like checking your watch, and you're like, but if you were there in person, it's a totally different experience. It's like this electricity, this energy being shared between the crowd members and the person on stage, and you can't replicate it on a Netflix special as easily. It's a total. There are some comedians that can. There are some comedians that pull off that medium very well, but for the most part, it's always better live. And I'm really hopeful that when this starts to turn around, that we can figure out a great way to do this, because it's a shame that we're sitting here wondering, like, there's so many aspects of life that are in question right now. And the arts are so important, because imagine doing any of this without music, without podcasts, without TV, without movies, without Netflix, without any of these things. Imagine if those didn't exist, and you imagine it's 1918, what those people went through.
Yeah,
it's kind of nuts to think of a world without this stuff. And so to me, it's very essential. To me, it should be something that should be worked on. Instead of saying, hey, we're going to pull the cabaret licenses from these clubs that are trying to find safe ways to do it outside, it's like, maybe you should invest in finding ways for people to do things like this safely that are outside, so you can take away so then you won't turn it into a situation where people are just going to do it anyway, and now they're breaking the law, and maybe they're doing it in a less safe manner.
Well, I know Michael Che is doing a couple of things that I thought was, really smart, just in a parking lot, and they're up on I think they're up on the back of like a pickup truck kind of stage, and people are, socially distanced in the parking lot, but they have a good PA system, so you can hear them, and everyone's far enough away. I thought that was genius. I know there's a couple of comics doing them in Astoria, J Nog. I know it's done very well in diner parking lots, because they have huge parking lots. Yeah. And they're not using them for anything. They're not at 100% capacity. So they're doing the same thing. And there's a lot. And, I really encourage people, if you see something like that, an outdoor show, in your area, you would be surprised the level of comics that you're going to find there because they're all around, they're all available.
Yeah,
So
and they're going to do it because they can't do anything else.
Yeah, so you are going to see Michael Che for free, and he is going to bring, his friends, and you're going to really get a high level of comic that you wouldn't think you'd be seeing out in a parking lot. You know?
And they're gonna because comedy is an art, it's a creative art. They're gonna come up with some new way, something that they never have done before, to apply comedy into a new situation. So you're gonna get like something that didn't exist previously, and that you're giving me a lot of hope for comedians out there.
I think we're going to be. My concern would be, what happens. To be very Game of Thrones. Winter is coming.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I would be concerned of what's going to happen to comedy and to live music and things like that, because then, Florida, is not in a good place right now. I don't think that come October, November, December, January, I don't think they're going to be ready to do something like that. I don't think they are. I think they're going to be, I think they're going to be shutting down in a way that they didn't shut down before.
It's quite possible. They might be forced into that.
So like, all that, when you're talking like places where this could go on during the winter, I don't think they'll be ready for it. And we can't have an outdoor show here in January in New York and New Jersey and Connecticut. We can't do it.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult to have a parking lot show in under like 3 feet of gray slush.
Yeah, exactly. And even if you're talking about, okay, well, the people are going to be in the car. Well, where's your comic going to be? Freezing to death in a blizzard?
Right. And it's all fun and games, but it's not like people can be drinking at these shows because they're sitting out in a parking lot in a car.
Yeah.
And so if you're cold and not drinking, that sucks.
Yeah.
So yeah, you bring up a very good point. There's got to be, yesterday I was just random things will show up in anyone's YouTube feed, and the band Rush showed up in my YouTube feed, and it was them playing in like South America, and I swear it was over 100,000 people. And I'm watching this with this like feeling of like, will this ever happen again? Are people going to look back at this kind of video of musicians playing in front of hundreds of thousands of people, like a sea of people where you can't even see the end of the people? Is that ever going to happen again? Like, do we go back to that? Or are we now just going to be playing to much more intimate things?
I wonder about that myself because, I know that, people talk of a vaccine, but vaccines, I am in no way an anti-vaxxer, but vaccines take a long time to develop.
Oh yeah. And the ones that, when you read about the ones that they're investing in right now, none of these things have been proven to work yet. Any of the ideas that they have and the technologies, they sound good on paper, but none of them have actually proven to do anything with humans yet. So we're taking a lot of bets to try to rush something out the door, and I'm afraid of a scenario where they rush something out the door just to get up this false confidence, and they end up killing a lot of people, not because the vaccine kills people, but because it's ineffective, and people get this false confidence and try to go back to normal too quickly.
Yeah, that's also my concern with schools opening back up. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't understand the parents. I guess I kind of understand the not parents who are saying open schools back up and throw everyone back in there. Sure, but I have a kid going into kindergarten, and I don't see how you get 4 and 5-year-olds to socially distance.
No, they don't.
They hug. They touch each other, they're covered in boogers. They're little germ factories. That's what they do. That's why, before COVID, everyone got, pink eye and impetigo and Coxsackie virus, and it takes out the whole class for a week.
And all the parents get it.
And all the parents get it. And, that's why teachers have such a great immune system, because they get hit with everything every year. But, I don't know why people seem to be so willing to sacrifice children for the sake of the economy.
Yeah.
And I don't get that. How do you, I mean, does nobody remember being, in high school in hallways? You can't socially distance that. They're on top of each other. These are closed environments. Are they going to have, like, again, we're in New York, so are you going to have all the windows open in February?
Yeah. It's not going to work, but then it's just so difficult. I'm lucky. I'm very privileged in the fact that my kids are old enough. My daughter's in college and my son's going to be a junior in high school. He's very self-sufficient. The last semester that he was doing, virtual schooling, we didn't hear a peep from him. He never complained. He got all A's. He did fine. He had 4 AP classes and he passed all of his AP classes. Like, he's like the easiest thing in the world. Like, this situation is almost ideal for him. And because it allows him to work at his own pace and not be held back by other kids, because that's just his mind. That's the way his mind works. But when I look at like my nieces and nephews that are, the parents kind of need they need to work, and they need that break of kids going to school. Like, it's going to be very, very difficult for a lot of people. Someone with kids your age, who, right now, kindergarten, you could probably push it back and whatnot, but you still got to work. You've got to get, that was, I hate to say that, like, that's your daycare, but in a way it is. I mean, for a lot of people, for most people that have kids.
Which is why I don't understand, I don't understand the government's reluctance to, support, like, the Congress and Senate, support your constituents, through this. That's what I don't understand, what the reluctance is. Like, why, and I'm not trying to trivialize, but I'm not trying to trivialize, 9/11, but that was, just under 4,000 lives that we memorialize every year.
Mm-hmm.
We've already lost, well over 150,000 lives. Why do these lives not matter?
Yeah, it's very scary. Let me ask you a question about your worldview, though. I do have a question about that. I'm going to try to steer it a little bit on here, because we could speak for 40 hours straight on everything that's wrong with here. But you have a very left of center worldview, and it's It's interesting to me. Given that where you went to school, probably, I would imagine a lot of those kids, not all of them, but a lot of them probably fall right of center. And not from where you work, but your interest in comedy tends to be more, I wouldn't say right of center, but the crowd that you tend to fall into, that Legion of Skanks crowd, the Anthony Cumia network, they kind of tend to lean more to the right side. And you see it a lot on your Facebook, a lot of the people commenting on you whenever, because you post a lot of fantastic content that is very left leaning, and then you get all this pushback from your fans from comedy. How did you get this worldview? Like, where did that start, and how did you get, and how do you find yourself living amongst these people that obviously you care about and love, that are not in the same, that don't hold the same values?
Well, I think for me, some of it has to do with college. I went to NYU, which is just generally a very left-leaning institution.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the city for a long time, which New York City tends to be very, very liberal. I lived outside of the U.S. I did a year-long study abroad in France, and I did 6 months in Switzerland. And it's just very interesting to see, what some of these social democracies have provided for their people, right? So why are we want our kids to, become professionals, and the American dream is you go to college. Sure. Why are we okay with our kids coming out with $200,000 in debt? Why do we want that? Why is that not shocking to anyone? Why are we comfortable with especially on Long Island. Like, why are we comfortable with the Hempstead School District, not having enough books, computers, teachers, just general, they don't have enough for their kids, but the Garden City School District has, more than enough for all of, and they're right next to each other. Why is anyone comfortable with that? Why do we feel like it's okay? Why in France do they get, 6 weeks of vacation, if not more? But here, most jobs, if you're in working for a corporation, they frown on you taking your vacation, just period.
Oh, yeah. They get mad.
Yeah, you take your vacation that you're entitled to, and they're pissed. You've earned it. You're entitled to it. They hired you, telling you got whatever it is, 2, 3 weeks, 1 week, whatever. They frown on you taking sick leave.
There are companies that would rather pay you for your time that you didn't take than let you take the time.
Yeah. I feel like the U.S. has also become very anti-child. They want to be, most of the country wants to be against abortion, but you don't want to do anything for our kids. There's no maternity leave. Maternity leave is something that's frowned upon. If you don't come back from maternity leave, within 4 weeks, everyone, is like, oh, here we go. She's pregnant again. Like, where do you expect our population is going to come from? People still get hired under employment contracts where they're allowed to terminate you if you get pregnant. That's just, it's wild to me. I don't understand that. I don't understand how, you have Republicans talking about family values and the family and this and that, but you won't sign off on the most basic of necessities, maternity leave. You can't sell a puppy that's less than 12 weeks old, but women are expected to come back to work after 4 weeks.
It's pretty interesting, but there are some of the points you bring up though and this isn't playing devil's advocate. It's just me through my life exploring all of the different reasons why people subscribe to the different ideologies that they do subscribe to. And some of the situations you can point to some of these things that we have where instead of going all in, we legislate things halfway, right? For instance, by guaranteeing student loans for kids, right? But for the U.S. government to say, we're going to guarantee this loan for student loans. Now, their intention was to get more people to go to school because, hey, if you lend these kids that maybe are that come from lesser means, we're going to guarantee the loan. So just let everybody go to school and we'll make sure that their loans get paid, right? This is a situation that happens time and time again in our government. But the weird opportunistic way that these schools saw that was, well, we can then just raise the rates and the government is going to guarantee that rate. And we'll see how far up we can charge people before. Where's the breaking point? If the government's going to guarantee these loans, we're just going to charge for a school that used to cost $1,000 a semester, they're going to cost $10,000 a semester. You know what I'm saying? And that's where we run into these problems. So, and then you kind of understand where some of the more conservative points of view say, hey, you're making things worse. Where I think personally, I'm like, well, why not make certain levels of education just free? And then you won't have that problem.
Or how about why did they make student loans not dischargeable in bankruptcy? If you've gotten to a point in your life where you're declaring bankruptcy, then you necessarily can't pay your student loans, right? So you can wipe away $300,000 of credit card debt, but you can't wipe away $100,000 of student loans.
Yeah, but that's the problem. That right there is the problem why education is so expensive right now, is because the government has guaranteed they're gonna pay it back, and instead of following the spirit of why that exists, they're like, how can I get mine?
But that's almost my point, is why are we comfortable with that? And why are we angry? And why as a country do we get angry that poor people exist? Why are we angry? So they want to talk about welfare fraud, which is, a half of a percentage of people on welfare. Why do you want to attack people for not having enough money to feed their kids? How about we work on making it so they can feed their kids, making it so their kids have, Head Start education programs that are fully funded by the state or by the federal government, so now they can go and work, or, they can go to a trade school, or they can do something. So why, instead of attacking them for not having money and needing money from the government, why aren't we just providing for them and helping? We have the money.
Right.
We have the money. Like, why are we allowing people to go into bankruptcy and lose everything because they got sick?
We're learning through this pandemic, by the way, that in a situation where it's needed, we have the ability to make sure that everyone's provided for.
Yes,
like we proved
exactly.
that it can happen. And I understand the danger of, hey, people are never going to want to go back to work again if you just keep giving them what they want. And I'm like, that's not true. That's simply not true. People want to do something. People are always going to want to do more. And if you give them the freedom to be able to do what they want to excel at, you're going to have a more productive society. And I think, we made that point clear at the beginning of this podcast today when we were talking about, like, hey, the whole reason I started this podcast is because now I have the time to do it. I had the means, blah, blah, blah. Here's an excuse to get off, to get something new going. And you're talking about how comedians are finding new ways to get out there and do their craft because they have to, they want to. Just because their financial needs might be met temporarily doesn't mean they don't want to go do that they don't want to work, that they don't want to do stuff. And I think there's this big fear that, like, if everyone has everything they need, then no one's going to want to work. And I'm like, that's just not true. Nobody would ever clean their own house if that was the case.
Yeah, and I think, there is something to be said for, if your basic needs are met, then you can do other things.
Right.
Right. And I think also, going back to what I said, like, a lot, I was a criminal defense attorney for a long time. And I think, people want to attack people that have been arrested, very specifically, drug dealers, right? They're like all these crack dealers and they're selling heroin and they're doing this. And these young kids are gang members. They're not born with a silver spoon in their mouth and then they decide they want to go onto the corner and sell crack. Their most basic needs are not being met. They don't have food. They don't have shelter. They didn't have an education. They have literally nothing else to do. There's nothing else that they can do. So they have to do something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now we're punishing them and we're paying upwards of $50,000 a year to house them in jail when we could have just done that from the outset. We could have done that with social programs. We didn't have to do this. We don't have to break apart families. We don't have to take people outside of society for 20 and 30 years and put them in a box. We can do other things. Other countries have proven that we can do other things.
Yeah. It's so this goes back to, you find yourself now in a situation where you're kind of surrounded by a lot of people who are disagreeing with you. But you still love them and you still work with them. They're like your brothers and sisters type of thing.
Well, some of them, right? So some of them, because there has been, I guess people have said that I'm mean, that I'm known for being mean to people, but I think, I actually get made fun of a lot for saying, like, it's internalized misogyny and it's internalized misogyny and it's internalized misogyny. But I feel like that's the case. Like, so because I feel a certain way and, you want to disagree with me and I make my point and then you attack me personally and then I come at you harder. Now I'm the mean one? How am I the mean one? Why aren't you the mean one for coming at me in the first place? Yeah.
And it's pretty interesting to watch how you interact with people. Cause a lot of times you're like, wait, does she know this person?
It's funny. Somebody actually recently reached out to me asking me something about getting a gun permit in Nassau County. Right. And I was like, I don't know. Like I'm a member of the gun range at Freeport, but some of my friends are, gun enthusiasts and I use their stuff. I don't have a weapon. And this guy was like, what? He's like, I've seen people threaten you on Facebook and on Instagram. How do you not have a weapon? I'm like, I'm not going to shoot some idiot. They're never going to come find me.
Yeah. And if they came to find you, most of the time they would just end up liking you and talking to you.
Yeah. And that's the same thing. I'm like, all these people, I think I'm so mean and I'm so horrible because I stood up for myself. When they actually meet me, they're fine. I'm like, why? And people are like, well, you should be nicer. Like, why should I be nicer? Why is it my responsibility to be nice to people I don't even know who, let's be real, are not even being nice to me? They're coming at me telling me I'm an idiot. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. I'm a libtard. I'm the less creative ones, I'm a bitch. Okay. And now it's my responsibility somehow to be nice to you and invite you over for tea and bake you some muffins. Why?
Yeah. Well, you're facing an uphill battle because not only are you on the left of center political sphere in a comedy world, which is very, and not all comedy, obviously, but you kind of find yourself or at least when I kind of see what comedians you're kind of grouped in with, they definitely tend to be the more like the Kurt Metzgers, which he's not, I wouldn't even call him a right wing guy, but these are guys that are, social justice warriors would not enjoy a lot of the comedians that you are lumped in with.
Well, there also is something to be said about, just letting them say what they're going to say. I know recently, Skanks has come under fire and people are saying they're Nazis and they're misogynists and
they're
probably
called the Legion of Skanks. They're not putting out but when you listen to them talk, you realize they're just kind of goofy guys that are having fun.
First of all, it's two Jewish guys and a Puerto Rican, right? So I don't know if Nazis really going to cover what's going on there. They're just talking. I know Metzger has gotten into some trouble for just talking. And I understand what's going on there. And I've had it happen to me. And it's very much, so there's some, like, there's left, and then there's like social justice warriors, and then there's just people who are excited to jump on anything you say. Right?
The take it out of context type of people.
Yeah, and whatever you say is, now they're just going to jump all over it and they're going to group you in wherever they want to group you in. But you're not allowed to say anything, right? You really aren't. So I've been pretty, outspoken about police reform, and I've tried now going forward. I try to not say defund the police, restructure the police, however, because I don't believe there shouldn't be a police force, but I think that there need to be certain changes.
Yeah, they shouldn't have so many. They shouldn't have so many responsibilities.
Yeah,
they should be more focused.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot to be said for how much power they've been given. There doesn't really seem to be any kind of a system of checks in place. I think that there just needs to be a restructuring. Defund the police sounds. It makes sense to me, but it doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. So
it's poorly worded. Yeah, the term is poorly worded.
Right. So like I get a lot of stuff where like, well, you hate all cops. I'm like, well, no, but I think that, the good cops should be the first in line to correct the bad cops, and they're not. And that's because this wall of silence has been fostered. This, it acts more like a fraternity, like a college fraternity than an organization that's meant to protect and serve. And I think if you incorporate other professions into what you want to call a police force, if you want to talk about, people want to like make fun of, saying like, oh yeah, well, what are they going to do when they send a social worker out to this particular situation? Social workers do go into that situation. They do. They're not cops, but there are emergency social workers that get sent in, to domestic disputes when it's, when maybe they should have a police escort, but they don't. And they're trained to diffuse the situation. They're trained to come in and offer some kind of assistance. They're trained to come in and offer some kind of counseling. Maybe they come in, ready with something. They have training I don't have. Maybe you refer them to family counseling. Maybe you bring, people out to a women's shelter, and now, the situation has been diffused for a few days. Maybe, there's a lot of things that can be done. And I don't understand why, there's no, people want to attack you without letting you go any further into
The nuance
into the conversation. Yeah, I know that specifically with Kurt. I remember at one point he got into a lot of shit because somebody was accusing someone else of rape. I think it was, at I don't remember actually. I don't remember if it was at a comedy club or at one of the improvs or something. And his position was like, maybe we wait and I obviously he worded it a lot more strongly. Maybe wait and see before we take this person down.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, he was a rapist and a rape apologist and a rape enthusiast. And
I'm seeing that a lot in across different creative forms.
And I do believe women. I do. And
of course.
But at the same time, I do believe that there should be some sort of, justice. There should be something,
Yeah, there's a reason why you can't function. You can't like participate in a cancel culture and then also think that it's a good idea to defund the police without thinking to yourself, wait, the reason why we want to quote unquote defund the police, for lack of a better term, is because they shouldn't be the judge, jury, and the executioner. They shouldn't be. They shouldn't have that kind of power. But meanwhile, you'll take that kind of power on yourself when you see a clip of something taken out of context and apply it to somebody, and then there's no. They don't apply their philosophy on the police towards themselves, which is, maybe you should let there be some sort of due process and find out what actually happened. Because there are, unfortunately, more cases than not where, the guy did do something fucked up. But there are enough cases of a woman using the power of that kind of cancel culture to hurt somebody improperly. And I'm sure the numbers are like 8 or 9 to 1 of that I'm saying it's mostly, the guy was a scumbag.
Yeah,
but for that,
so they believe women, but investigate the men.
But for the one Johnny Depp, you know what I'm saying? The one case of the Johnny Depp where it turns out, hey, Johnny Depp really wasn't a scumbag,
Yeah.
But everyone was ready to cancel. The same thing with like understanding the idea of somebody who has paid their dues or done their time, like a Joey Diaz, to sit there and pull one of his stories where he talks about things he did in his past. It's like, hello, he went to prison for that. This guy jokes about this stuff and talks about these stories of things and all of the awful things. That was a guy that's gone and dead and buried. It's not the same person who's talking to you now and sharing those stories. So when they tried to cancel that guy, it was pretty funny to see how many women came forward in his defense.
Well, I also think it's a big part of cancel culture that has never made sense to me is, when, the internet sleuths go in and they decide that they're going to dig up a tweet from, 2010 and they're like, oh yeah, see what he did, see what she said. And it's like, well, is there any room for personal growth?
Yeah.
Is there any?
That person doesn't exist. I mean, if you're living in the now, you have to understand that people have learned. There are a ton of people who, from watching this George Floyd tape, have done a complete 180 on their view of police brutality. And that's a good thing. Little late in the game, but it's understandable because it's happened so many times and like they see this, it's black and white. You can see what's going on. This person is murdering someone right in front of you. And people have changed their mind. There's so many people change their mind. And so for you to say, hey, Jim from down the block used to think like all these black dudes were lying about getting killed by cops, but now he's like changed his mind. But if you pull up a tweet from him from 5 years ago and hold that person from 5 years ago to the same standard of the guy he is now, that's not fair to the person who he is now. He has learned. He has been educated, so to speak.
Yeah. Judge me as I am, not as I was.
Yeah, it's a pretty and it's this weird thing of you're not allowed to work, like because you were stupid at some point. Like if there were Twitter or Facebook when we were younger, I'd be so screwed. Like when testosterone was flowing and like stupidity was rampant and, underage drinking was a thing and like the decisions you make as a child, the things you said to people, there are things I think about that I have said to people, and I'm like, I wonder if I like really truly hurt someone's feelings or affected somebody from a bad decision I made, and like I wouldn't even, and I probably don't even know, you know. And like now these kids are growing up and they've got documented proof of every stupid decision they've made and every dumb thing they've ever said. It's pretty awful.
Yeah, and it sucks. There's no room for error anymore. You can't misspeak. I feel very bad for Joe Biden, as somebody who's definitely like, been trying to get something out and stuttered or said the wrong word, or, now it's like you literally can't misspeak. As soon as you misspeak, it's like, oh, well, he said blah, 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 blah. And it's like, all right, give him a second to correct himself.
You know, it's something funny about an interesting thing about Joe Biden. And I try to tell people this because he's a lifelong stutterer. Like he actually suffers from severe stuttering. It's something he deals with and he's overcome. But when you see him, he is very uncomfortable public speaking. And he has a hard time speaking. Like he's if you look up Joe Biden stuttering, he's like the spokesperson for like the National Stuttering Foundation or something like that. But he doesn't ever talk about it. He doesn't lean on it and say like, this is why I'm talking like this. This is why I make all these flubs.
I never heard that before and I didn't know that. And now that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. He's somebody who stutters, and that's just part of who he is. And he's never let it hold him down, and he's never focused on it. But I always wondered why. I'm always like, why doesn't he just explain to people like, hey, I've got this stuttering issue. If I misspeak or if I fumble over my words, this is why. It's not dementia, because you can find tape of Joe Biden stumbling over his words his whole career. It's not an old age thing. So that always gets me annoyed about like attacks on Biden. I'm like, wow,
I really wish I had known that. Now I'm gonna
I should share it on social media.
You really should. Like, you really should. I would I would like to share that too, because there are so many times when he said something and I'm like, okay, he misspoke. This happens to all of us all the time.
Yeah, and he's just dealt with it. He's learned how to push past it, which is fantastic. It's stuttering is one of those weird things where it still gets laughed about. It's like a disability that people will make fun of still, and it's still kind of okay to make fun of. It's hard for people to take it seriously still. There's no big movement to stop making fun of stuttering.
Yeah, especially because the president we have makes fun of other people with disabilities. So it's not, but at least I think if it came out more, if it was more, I literally never heard that. If it was more widely known, then I think there'd be less, people going, oh, well, he's senile. He doesn't even know what he's saying. Like, no, give him a minute. The King of England had a stuttering problem. He muscled it out. There was a whole movie. There was a whole ass movie about it.
Yeah. I kind of wish people would listen to the content, because the same thing. I mean, they give the benefit of the doubt to Trump as far as they try to listen to what he's saying, because if you try to decipher the words, when you take the words that are coming out of his mouth and you put them on paper, you're like, does this person speak English as their first language? Like, it doesn't even make sense. But people can follow along and figure out what he's trying to say, but they don't like to give the benefit of the doubt to someone else. So, what are you going to do? All right, so I'm going to try to wrap this up here. We've kind of gotten off into a lot of cool conversations, and I'm grateful that we did. But I
I talked a lot. I'm sorry. If you were trying to keep this to like 45 minutes, I should have warned you.
No, I'm happy to. There's no rules here. Yeah, I'm still feeling out what my whole format is.
I can flap my yap for like 4 hours if you, if you let me go.
Well, I wanted to. So if I search your name, you don't have a website, do you?
I don't. I actually need to. It's one of those things that like I'm not tech savvy, and I need to do that. I need to build a website. I actually I discussed this briefly with Amy. Like I had these big goals to do like a weekend vacation in South Carolina so I could get you to do my headshots and take the girls around. And like, I don't know, I had so many like big plans. I really should have just learned how to do a website during the pandemic while we were quarantined. I should have done that, but I need to do that.
Well, so the best way for people to find you, honestly, is through either your Facebook or your Instagram, right?
Yeah, Facebook, Instagram. I don't Twitter very much, but I feel like I'm moving away from Facebook. It's happening because I just have gotten so many. I feel like, am I wrong about this? Does Facebook just make you too accessible somehow?
I think because by design it was set up so that you could actually befriend the people you know in real life and your family, that it became very much like that kind of relationship of people you actually know. And then when people from outside of that can look in, it starts to feel a little creepy. And then when the advertisers and things like that and the algorithms kind of manipulate who can see you, and you just, it's very odd. It seems to be a lot more toxic lately. And I have definitely, I go on there, like I'll go in there just like go in for a second to post something that I'm promoting or something like that, or, you know, to look at a group that I might be a part of and then get out. And I spend more time on Instagram because it's highly curated of things I actually care to see if I've got to experiment it. So I do think the Instagram, even though it's all the same company, which is so sad. I wish it was still separate. But
Yeah.
Instagram is definitely a lot less of a stressful experience.
Yeah, I just feel like this is the sick new reality. I'm just tired of all the threats I get on Facebook. Like, enough already. I get it. Enough.
Do you get a lot of sexual things because you're a woman too? Do you get
I was outing people for a little while there, and then you know, like I was posting, like Facebook shut me down recently.
For screenshotting?
Not shut me down, but like I screenshotted. Like I used to get these like really crazy dick pics, and I started like posting them, and then one of them was like really explicit, and Facebook was like, "You can't post this," and I was like, "Why? But why can this, like, literally nobody can send me a picture of his junk and I can't post it on my page?
Right.
Why not?"
It's just one of those things that most dudes don't have to like deal with. It's like a whole side of the internet that most men have no idea exists. Like if you're a female on social media, you're getting unsolicited dick pics, and it's like, why is that okay? Who decided that's?
I mean, some of these dicks really, like.
Yeah, you're like, why?
You guys should be ashamed of yourselves. Really, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Like, I mean, at least put your best dick forward. You know what I mean? Like, isn't this like a job interview? Like your CV? Like, you really want, you know, shouldn't it be like, you know, the firm handshake when you walk in the door of a job interview? This is the first impression I'm going to get on you. You're going to post this sad little untrimmed, half flaccid dick. Come on.
Yeah, well, someone's got to come up with a good movie or like a good script or a TV series or something where women will get an unsolicited dick pic and say, "Oh, that's nice. Let's go on a date," and like film the date and just see how that goes. Or you know what I'm saying? Like, just because nobody's ever gotten a date from sending a dick pic unsolicited. It's never happened.
It would have to be the most extraordinary dick.
And even still, you'd be like, "This is your opening line. This is what you have to offer."
Yeah, it's still weird. It's still weird, but like, I mean, I don't think I would. But I guess, you know, if you're like, you know, I don't know. I just think it's a weird start.
I'd like to know if anyone has anyone ever gotten into a relationship with somebody who just sent them like an inappropriate message on social media, like totally unsolicited. There's got to be
really
one.
Never understand. Yeah, there must be one, but I really also never, and it probably was like a killer dick pic. It had to really be, you know,
it's like a piece of art.
It had to really be like, you know, this person had to be the Ansel Adams of dick pics. You know, it had to have like lighting and like, you know, probably black and white if I had to guess.
Yeah. And yeah, the angle has to be just right. And
there has to be some sort of body waxing involved.
And there has to be something in there to like gauge size. So there's like a G.I. Joe figure like standing next to it.
You know so you know it's not a scam. It has to be like not too big, but not too little. Like not too big that it would be intimidating. You know, it's really like the Goldie Cox of pictures, if you will.
I don't imagine. Like, can you imagine like getting that the perfect dick pic gets sent to you? And like, how long does it take for you to like, do you respond? Do you like, oh my gosh, this is the perfect dick pic. Let's go out. Like, what's what's the MO on their part? Like, are they
I
trying to
mean,
get a date?
I don't know. For me, it would really be more like, wow, this is the perfect dick pic. Can we talk about like what did you do? Like, I really would be more fascinated. Like, what did you do here? Like, clearly this wasn't a quick snap. Like, how long did it take you to like pose? Like, to
Can I see
get
the
yourself all like,
outtakes?
yeah, like, did you like, set everything up and then get yourself all chubbed up? Like, is this a filter? Like, this is great. Like, how long did it take? I want the backstory to this picture. If you have the perfect dick pic, I want the backstory, and that might make me, interested in you.
If they can turn it around and give you like the best
yeah,
representation of how they crafted it.
Yeah, and if somebody was like, I just thought, like, I heard you talking about how these, dick pics were all lame, and then I sat here and I crafted a background, and I had a timer, and I got a really great camera, and I took weeks of pictures. And then I did this, I did that. I got a wax. I waxed, so I trimmed my stuff down, and then I did some more sit-ups so my abs would pop, and all of this was because you said that we don't put effort into it, and now I'm sending it to you. I would be like, wow. So that is a thoughtful dick pic.
So, Carla, what you're saying is your ideal guy is somebody with a passion for anything. Just somebody with enough passion to put the time and effort to make something work for them.
Yeah, put your best dick forward is all I'm saying.
Yeah, see, gentlemen, like, it's all you have to do. It doesn't even have to be a dick pic. Just show some sort of determination and skill.
Show some effort and some creativity.
Yeah.
Anyone can just take a picture of their schlong, It's too easy.
I think we're onto something though. Like the quest for the perfect dick pic,
Like this could really take your photography career to another level.
I mean, you've heard of headshots. Now we've got sped shots. Yeah, that would be. You got to imagine the type of person though that would put that type of effort in it. It's not the type of person who's sending out dick pics.
Yeah, no. I feel like you put that effort in, like when you're already like halfway in, and you're like, I think this girl may ask for a dick pic, so I feel like I have her interest, and if she asks for one, right? If she's like, oh, we should exchange nudes, I don't want her to be like, oh, is that what you have? Thanks. Like, I just want her to be impressed. Like we're already hitting it off. We're already talking. Now I'm going to send her this. And I I really want to reel her in at this point. It's got to look great. Like a headshot. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, the headshots definitely, there's a lot of, there's an art to it. There's a lot of breaking down the person and making sure, you've got a definite thing you're going for. Because someone's going to look at this picture and make an instant judgment. So you got to make sure their expression isn't like phony. It's not creepy. There's a whole lot of psychological things going into like the look that someone's giving you in a headshot. So the same thing could be said about a quality dick pic.
Yeah. I think I think there's a real market for this. I think there's a real market for this because let me tell you something. The trash that I get sent is not getting anybody a first
fluorescent
date.
Lighting so it looks like it's got gangrene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some weird coloring issues, like some Neapolitan dicks come through. I don't know what that's about.
Has this guy got vitiligo on his dick?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Throw a little makeup on there.
He's got a map of it, like some South American country on here.
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah,
you should see my dermatologist. That's not normal.
I don't think the vein should be girthier than the rest of the cock. I just don't. That something's wrong here. There's disproportion going on. Yeah, it's one of those odd things. No women send out clit pics, by the way, unsolicited. It doesn't happen. And if you get a picture from a woman and it's like this beautifully professional picture, it's just some dude who stole a picture online is trying to scam you out of something.
Yeah, again, I don't send like nudes because I don't really see what's the point. Like you want to see the same thing. You really want to just see the inner workings of my my snooter? Really?
Yeah.
Like, why?
Yeah. Well, I think men are very visual in that aspect, and maybe that's why they think you want to see their dick, is because they think like, well, I would like someone to send me this, so why don't they want to see this? Meanwhile, women are like, yeah, thanks for the info. It's just,
That's a no. It's gonna
yeah.
be a no for me, dog.
Yeah, but it would be an interesting script to find the one guy who's met the love of his life because he sent an unsolicited dick pic. His quest for love through being a fucking creep.
You know what? Like, my a thing I actually talk about in my set, which I kind of learned by accident, is airdrop dick pics. Airdrop dick pics.
Okay, that's a New York thing, by the way. That's definitely a New York thing because I haven't seen that happen here. But
oh, really?
Well, because I just don't think people would even think you're not in a crowded situation where it's not like you're sitting in subway cars or in really crowded places or in a building where like you're in enough Bluetooth range to pick up other people's airdrop on a regular. So,
I guess you're right because I've only gotten them on the subway and Penn Station and the Long Island Railroad.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing where somebody's on the car in the train, maybe in your car or the next car over, and they just open up airdrop and see who has it turned on, and next thing you know, you're looking at deformed dick pics.
Which is to me is hilarious because also a lot of like airdrop dick pics don't come with like any kind of a return address, nothing. Like, it's like, say something, say, hey, hi, like, I'm in the same train car. It's just like a dick. So it's like, even if I wanted to, like, once I get off the train, it's over.
Yeah. And you can't even hold it up because if you hold it up and be like, whose dick is this? Now you're the asshole.
Yeah. All of a sudden now I'm the asshole. Whose dick is this, you dick? Who did this? Shame.
I guess maybe that could be the way you could find out, though. You could just be like, whoever sent out that picture, I'm interested. And then see if anyone approaches you and then just be like, are you for fucking real? Can I talk to you for a minute and find out? And there you go. And then you got
like, what is wrong with you? What would your mom think?
Yeah, that's either a plot to a really good comedy or a horror movie. Unfortunately, you don't
probably
know.
A horror movie. That's definitely how you get murdered.
Yeah.
100% that's how you get murdered.
We've been watching too many weird movies lately. There's been a couple of them. We just watched The Rental, which is like an Airbnb kind of slasher type of movie. And meanwhile, I'm sitting here telling my wife right before we watch it, I'm like, hey, can we go rent a house on the beach? Since even though we live by the beach, we can't go to the beach because they limit the parking and everyone that's at the beach is from out of town. And it really sucks to live near the beach and not be able to use the beach.
Oh, wow.
It's one of the things we're dealing with here in the Charleston area. Anyway, that same day we watched this movie about like an Airbnb and somebody spying on them and killing them. And I don't know.
I try not to watch too many of those movies because I'm already like, I weirdly feel more comfortable in the city or like in more densely populated areas. Like, if I have to run back out to my car, my street is totally quiet. If I have to run back out to my car, it's like, do I really need that? Do I need it? If it's like 10 o'clock at night, I'm like, do I need it? And then if I do, like, it's a sprint out the door to the car and a sprint back in, and then I like slam the door because I'm like, this is definitely like, quiet streets are where I feel like, serial murders really do what they do. Like, I can't hear shit from my neighbor's house. Like, I don't know what's going on across the street.
Man.
Like someone's going to sneak in, someone's going to be hiding in my bushes. I'm going to be murdered and my neighbors won't know about it until, 3 days later when they want to complain that my grass hasn't been mowed.
All right, Carla, I'm going to wrap this up now because I'm going to let you get to your wonderful children.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you for coming on because I'm realizing how many people I know that do have creative pursuits in their life, and they're in all different phases of it. And I love it because, like we said earlier, there's that string that's pulling you into this thing, and there's no rationality behind it. You have to do it. It's bringing you happiness. It's bringing other people happiness. It's your connection to it's a way for you to connect with people in a very unique way. That's all you. And we're all happy that you're doing this.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad I was able to, make you and Amy laugh.
that was such an exciting part of that trip. I was just like, I can't wait. We're gonna get to go to a comedy show, but we're gonna know, one of the people performing, and it's just gonna be fantastic. And my wife's she has a harder time with some comedy shows because she's not an easy audience, and she had a great time that night.
I'm thrilled.
Yeah, she is a very critical audience member. She will not give up a laugh just to be like uncomfortable or anything like that. Like she is completely stoic unless she's truly like laughing. So she was completely impressed by your set. The whole night was great, but your set was, she was like, damn, Carla's funny. So
yay!
That's because you're funny. All right. So Instagram, what's your handle?
At Carla Oakerson. Facebook also at Carla Oakerson. And for the rare times that I tweet, it's at Carla ESQ.
That's the lawyer speak.
Yeah, at Carla ESQ. But I think it works for both because it's Carla S. Like you don't want a lot of Carla sometimes. Sometimes you just want a little Carla, like a Carla S moment.
Aww.
You don't want so much Carla.
Well, I think everyone needs to get as much Carla as they can take. Because
Not
it'll
that
make
much.
the world it'll make the world a little bit funner and more compassionate place. Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks so much.